Growing up in a quiet corner of rural Vermont, I often found myself yearning for the buzz of city life. My childhood home sat on a vast stretch of land, surrounded by dense forests and winding dirt roads. It was picturesque but isolating, with little to do but explore the woods or lose myself in books. As soon as I turned 18 and saved enough money, I moved to the city, leaving behind the solitude of the countryside. My parents sold the property a few years later, but the memories of that place linger, especially one chilling experience that still haunts me. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when it happened. I was 14 years old, home alone for the weekend as my parents had gone to visit my grandmother. They trusted me to look after the house and our dog, Max, who was my constant companion. I spent most of the day reading in the living room, the golden light of the setting sun filtering through the trees and casting long shadows across the floor. I was deeply engrossed in a novel when a sudden loud thud echoed from outside. Startled, I jumped up and looked out the window, expecting to see Max chasing a squirrel or something equally mundane. Instead, I saw the door to our old barn swinging open. The barn was a good distance from the house, used mostly for storage and rarely visited. My heart raced as I grabbed a flashlight and decided to investigate. I called for Max, but he didn't come running, which was unusual. Holding the flashlight tightly, I stepped outside, the crunch of leaves underfoot sounding unnaturally loud in the stillness. The cool air bit at my cheeks as I approached the barn, its door creaking ominously in the breeze. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. There was no answer, just the eerie silence of the approaching night. I shone the flashlight into the barn, its beam cutting through the darkness. Shadows danced across the piles of old tools and forgotten equipment. I hesitated, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. Something didn't feel right. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside, the floorboards groaning under my weight. I swept the flashlight around, revealing nothing but dusty shelves and cobwebs. Just as I was about to leave, a sudden movement caught my eye. In the far corner of the barn, behind a stack of crates, I saw a figure crouched low. My breath caught in my throat. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice trembling. The figure didn't move, and for a moment I wondered if my eyes were playing tricks on me. Summoning every ounce of courage, I took a step closer, the flashlight shaking in my hand. The figure slowly stood up, revealing a tall, gaunt man with wild eyes. He looked disheveled, his clothes torn and dirty. "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to sound braver than I felt. The man didn't respond. Instead, he took a step towards me, and I saw something glinting in his hand. Panic surged through me. Without thinking, I turned and ran out of the barn, my heart pounding in my chest. I sprinted back to the house, slamming the door behind me and locking it. I grabbed the phone and dialed 911, my hands shaking so badly that I could barely press the buttons. As I waited for the operator to answer, I peeked out the window, expecting to see the man following me, but there was no sign of him. Max was still nowhere to be found. When the operator picked up, I quickly explained what had happened. She told me to stay on the line and wait for the police. Minutes felt like hours as I crouched by the window, the flashlight clutched in one hand and the phone in the other. Finally, flashing lights illuminated the driveway. I ran to the door and let the officers in, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. They searched the barn and the surrounding property, but found no sign of the man. They did, however, find Max hiding under the porch, unharmed but clearly shaken. The police stayed with me until my parents returned the next morning. They were horrified by what had happened and immediately took steps to increase the security of the house. I never felt safe there again, always looking over my shoulder, haunted by the memory of those wild eyes in the dark. Years later, the incident still lingers in my mind. Moving to the city was a fresh start, but the experience taught me to be cautious and aware of my surroundings. It was a stark reminder that danger can lurk even in the most serene and familiar places. It was the height of summer, and as a 10-year-old, my days were filled with outdoor adventures. My younger brother Alex, who was 7, and I spent most of our time playing various games with the other neighborhood kids. As the sun began to set, we reluctantly headed home, eager to catch our favorite TV shows before bed. Our parents had a tradition of exploring different restaurants around town about once a week. Sometimes they would inform us before heading out, but if we were busy playing outside, they would leave without mentioning it, trusting us to manage ourselves. That evening, when we arrived home, the house was empty. We found a note on the kitchen counter confirming our parents were out for dinner. Alex and I settled in the living room, watching TV as darkness fell outside. About half an hour later, the tranquility was interrupted by the sound of the doorbell ringing, followed by a series of knocks. At first, I thought it might be our parents returning, but it was unusual for them to use the front door, and they always had a key. Curious and a bit wary, I approached the door. As I neared, I heard a man's voice claiming he was selling Girl Scout cookies. The oddity of the situation struck me immediately. It was late, and the voice didn't sound like it belonged to someone associated with the Girl Scouts. I peered through the peephole and saw a grown man alone, with no cookies in hand. The man called out again, louder this time, and reached for the door handle. My heart sank as I realized we had forgotten to lock the door when we came inside. The handle began to turn slowly, and I quickly engaged the deadbolt, the loud click echoing through the quiet house. I knew he had heard it, and now he knew someone was inside. I waited a tense minute before looking through the peephole again. The man had moved to the living room window and was peering inside, directly at Alex, who remained blissfully unaware of the danger. From my new vantage point, I noticed a gun holstered at the man's waist. Panic surged through me. I rushed back to the living room, closed the blinds, and tried to think quickly. I told Alex we should go get some ice cream from the basement, making up a story to keep him calm and unaware of the true situation. He agreed, and we went downstairs. Once in the basement, I locked the door silently behind us. We sat in the dimly lit basement, eating our ice cream. The minutes dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. Finally, the hum of the garage door opening signaled that our parents were home. Relief washed over me, but I knew I had to tell them what had happened. After Alex went to bed, I recounted the evening's events to our parents. They were horrified and immediately called the police. The officers arrived quickly and conducted a thorough inspection of the house. One of the first things they noticed was that the front door's lock had been tampered with, confirming that the man had ill intentions. What he planned to do once inside, we'll never know. The police never identified him and he was never caught. To this day, Alex remains blissfully ignorant of that terrifying night. It's a secret I still keep. A haunting reminder of how quickly a seemingly ordinary evening can turn into a nightmare. Shortly after my 15th birthday, my parents surprised me with an Xbox and my own monitor, allowing me to game in the comfort of my room. My bedroom was upstairs, and the weeks following my birthday were spent largely immersed in the world of gaming. It was a Saturday night, and I was deep in conversation with two school friends via Xbox Party Chat. My parents were away for the weekend at a work convention, leaving me alone at home. The volume on my headphones was cranked up, but during a lull in our conversation, I heard a thumping noise coming from downstairs. If you've ever been home alone as a kid, you know how any unusual sound can send your imagination into overdrive. I turned down the volume and took one headphone off, straining to listen. For the next 5 minutes, everything was quiet. Just as I was about to dismiss it as my mind playing tricks, the noise came again. I told my friends about it, and they joked that I should go check it out, teasing me about a possible intruder. I laughed along but agreed to investigate during the next break in our game. When the time came, I took off my headphones and cautiously headed toward the stairs. As I descended, I began to hear soft whispering. I froze halfway down, listening intently to determine if what I was hearing was real. Summoning my courage, I crouched down to peek into the living room. To my horror, I saw 4 men, dressed entirely in black, moving silently around the room. My brain struggled to process what I was seeing. All I knew was that I had to get back upstairs. Slowly, I began to crawl back up the stairs, but one of the steps let out a loud creak echoing through the house. There was no way they didn't hear it. Thinking quickly, I bolted to my room, put on my headset, and frantically told my friends to call the police. They sounded confused and serious, asking what was happening. I didn't have time to explain fully, so I just urged them to hurry and toss the headset aside. Locking myself in my room seemed like an obvious move, so I decided to hide in the bathroom further down the hallway. I left the bathroom door slightly ajar and turned off the light, hoping they wouldn't think to check there. As I sat in silence, I heard multiple sets of boots ascending the stairs. The sound grew louder until I could hear someone banging on my bedroom door, trying to break it down. Voices shouted threats, demanding that I open the door if I didn't want to get hurt. Fear gripped me as I tried to silently open the bathroom window. The noise must have given me away because I heard boots approaching the bathroom. Just as the door fully opened, I managed to dive headfirst out of the window. I landed awkwardly, injuring my neck, but I quickly looked back up at the window. A dark silhouette stood there, motionless, staring at me. Panic surged through me as the backyard door slid open and 3 men came rushing out. I tried to get up and run, but my body wouldn't respond in time. They grabbed me, pulling me back toward the house, but suddenly the distant sound of police sirens filled the air. The men froze, exchanged glances, and then sprinted toward the backyard fence, climbing over it and disappearing into the night. Moments later, the police arrived in the backyard. I pointed them in the direction the men had fled, and while some officers took off in pursuit, another stayed with me. Only one of the intruders was caught inside the house. The other 3 escaped and were never found. As the police questioned me, my 2 friends arrived on their bikes, having come over as soon as they called the cops. Even today, I routinely thank them for their quick thinking, which likely saved my life. The police found 4 knives and a couple of loaded pistols left behind in the house, a chilling reminder of how close I came to a far worse fate.